Welcome to the Feelings Files, where we explore real, raw, and powerful stories of resilience. I'm Michaela, a mental health therapist and a doctoral student studying resilience. This podcast dives into the journeys that test us and the resilience we build along the way. Through connection, we can plant seeds of healing. So grab a seat and let's dive in, one conversation at a time. We're in this together. I like narrative therapy.
I do like narrative. Yeah. I do like
narrative. Yeah. I think EMDR really pulls a lot of things I like together, and they don't call it the things that I know it really is. It's like some Adler, it's some narrative.
I think it all is so, like, I always say it's like just kind of like a mashed potato. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, or like a baked potato, maybe that's a better word. Like, they're all separate ingredients, but like,
yeah,
they all make up.
Right.
Like, if I didn't have the cheese on the potato, like, yeah, it wouldn't feel full to me.
Yeah.
Unless you're lactose intolerant, then obviously you're not.
Right.
Maybe the, like, dairy-free cheese, that's not my business. Right? No. But they all make up a part of the whole.
Yes, it comes together somehow. Yeah, I agree. I know you focus a lot on somatic work with your clients. Yeah, and I learn so much every time we talk about it. I learn from you. We don't learn a ton about that in school. I mean, that information I don't feel like is very readily accessible.
No.
How do you explain that to people when you start working with them?
I always tell people this is something which, like, even I make me sound like I'm the end all be all. That's not what I meant. I just mean I practice this every day, right? Yeah. So even as somebody who practices, I always say nervous system work. Like, yeah, that's what I call it. People use somatic work a lot, and I do really like the word somatic, but I think I struggle with it because I know there's so much more I have to learn when it comes to somatics versus, like, nervous system. I'm like, right, okay, I know her. I know that piece, right? And so when I explain it to people, even I'm like, I'm not quite sure how to explain this to you. Yeah. Like, because it is so much more of a felt experience versus me tossing knowledge at you or tossing fact at you or tossing research at you. Is that piece important? Absolutely. And also, I'm like, I want you to feel what I mean when I say, let's have your nervous system lead us along this journey, essentially. So, however, when I do explain it to people, a lot of the time I will explain it as, let's think of it this way. Like, when we think of therapy, when we think of emotion, when we think of anything really well-being, mental health, we always come to the brain, right? Yeah. We're like, brain's in charge.
Right.
You know, I'm going to say she. Maybe that's because I identify as a woman, so I just refer to everything as she. But it leads the way, right? And so I take the opposite. Right. Yeah. And so instead of, I'm like, brain's in charge, brain's doing everything, I'm like, well, maybe something else is in charge. Right.
Yes.
And we're not even aware of it. We don't even know it. We're not even, in connection with it. And maybe that's why things are so hard. Right. So I instead let's listen to the body. Let's listen to nervous system. Let's listen to maybe, what does it have to provide? What does it have to say? What is it trying to tell us? And maybe we're not even sure how to hear it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times I explain it to people like this, like, the brain is a language we know, right? Like, it's as if it's an English speaker, and we can hear it really well. We can understand it really well. We can communicate it really well.
It's logical.
Also, yes. And also, we're missing a lot, right? Of like, our nervous system does that too. And most of the time we're like, but I don't know how to speak that language, right? I don't know how to communicate with it. I don't know how to understand it. I don't even know how to connect with it, right? And so then we just keep with the brain because this feels much safer. This feels much more reliable. And so I kind of explain it to people like that. I'm like, both hold a part, right? Kind of back to the baked potato. I'm not sure if you'll keep the baked potato part in this, right? But both have an important role. It's not just one or the other. It's we need both. We need connection in both. But we're so much more easily connected to our brains than we are to our bodies. And so this kind of comes much more natural. Versus honing in on nervous system is like a new language essentially being learned. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. And I agree. It's like this language we don't quite understand on a surface level. It's like we have to dig a little bit deeper to hear the messages from our nervous system. And, I often hear people, I am not feeling good. I'm feeling a bit anxious. I'm not able to sleep. I don't really know what's going on. Nothing really happened. Just this time of the year, I always start to feel off. And it's like, okay, what happened this time of year? Your body remembers and it holds on to memories. It holds on to things. And, maybe we don't know why. Maybe it's a protection mechanism, but we know that it happens and it just, it holds things. And we have to be able to bring that to the surface and acknowledge it so we can heal.
Yeah. I always tell people a lot too, like, if we don't know intellectually, it does not mean we do not know on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Right. It means you're not aware of it
Yeah.
in this kind of logical place of like, okay, well, on Monday, I did the same thing I did every day. Tuesday, I did the same thing I did every day. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, cool. And also, right, like obviously something's happening because you're not just having this response out of nowhere. Right. That would be kind of rare.
Yeah.
Not to say maybe it doesn't happen. I don't know everything about anything, right? And so,
yeah.
So, not to say. And I just encourage people of like, what would it be like to have curiosity about maybe something's going on beneath the things we know?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, what's the harm in that? What's the harm in being willing to look into that a little bit deeper? Right. Not necessarily because I always think this is really interesting, and I would love to get your perspective on this too, of it's not necessarily about getting rid of the effects of trauma or getting rid of anxiety or depression or, versus how do I learn to build relationship with that? How do I learn to be with that? Because I always think about it of like, healing is never just going to stop one day. You're never going to, just wake up and be like, I'm healed. Oh yeah. Right. Like I have like overcome this thing. I'm 100% better. It doesn't affect me at any level anymore. Oh yeah. And so I often have that conversation with clients too of like, even when we're focusing on your nervous system, it's not because we're going to remove the memory from it. Yeah. Versus we're going to allow it to be there. Right. We are going to allow it to communicate. Like, why are you holding on to this memory? How can I help you be in better relationship with this memory? And how do I bring you to the present? Not meaning this is just going to go away entirely. Yeah. But how do I more peacefully live with this thing that I'm never just going to get rid of?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think there's some things we can understand and some things maybe not quite. So one thing I can understand easily is anxiety. In my experience, I've had some social anxiety and it's always anticipating the event. I think on a subconscious level, my brain kind of, what if this goes wrong? What if this goes wrong? Not even conscious thoughts really, but more so just anticipating all of the things that might happen, right? And so it's a protection for myself. My anxiety is like, I'm here to protect you. I'm here to help you. Let me cause your heart to race and let me stop your breathing so we can protect you, make sure you're all good, right? My body senses some threat. And so I can understand that. I can grasp the underneath why. I can see, okay, there's a purpose here. Let me take a deep breath, acknowledge there's no threat. Everything's safe. I'm okay. Thank you, anxiety. Let's rest now. I appreciate it, but we're good. I don't need the adrenaline right now. Nothing's chasing me. We can calm down, so I can understand that. And I value that anxiety. I have anxiety about things I care about, right? So I tell people sometimes, yeah, you're feeling this way because you care, let's use that anxiety to help you, to motivate you, to push you. There's a line there. Obviously, when it's debilitating, we got to work on that a little bit. But when it's manageable, I think it can be something that provides a little bit of help in showing all right, I'm ready. I got this. I care about it. It helps get us up in the morning when we're excited about something. I think it can be helpful. So having that relationship is so crucial and important to appreciate the protective mechanisms that our body provides for us. On the other end of that, I think there are some things I don't quite understand, the why underneath things. I had an experience a few days ago where an incident happened. It was just such a quick moment, but the specific imagery really brought me back to some very traumatic things that happened 14 years ago. This year will be 14 years since I suffered a very, very traumatic loss. And that specific imagery, it's like it put me back in that moment, into a few moments really. It's like all of a sudden it just hit me like a truck, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt the tears coming. I felt this incredible wave of despair over my entire body. You know, I felt heavy. I feel it again right now just talking about it. I haven't felt like that in, 14 years. You know, I have not felt that way since it happened. And it's like it slammed me right back. And my body, it's like it just automatically remembered. I don't know what the purpose is of that. I don't know why that happened. You know, 14 years later, you'd think like, you're good. But no, I think that showed me my body is still very, very much holding on to something. And I don't know why, you know. I don't know how to have a relationship with that.
So we call that the process of, and again, I think this comes back to a lot of like, we're never just going to get rid of that memory, right? That is something that is going to be with you the entirety of your life.
Right.
As much as I know it's like, that's hard to hear. You're like, oh God, I don't want that memory, right?
Yeah.
But that's trauma, right? Of like, we're never going to get rid of that incident. I mean, there's no really memory in our life. We can just be like, I'm rid of that memory.
Erase.
Right? Versus your body holds on to memory for a reason. So this is what I always say. Our nervous system's job, our body's job is to keep us alive. Ultimately, it is for survival. It does not mean it is for happy and healthy living. It does not mean it is for wholesome, balanced living. It is for living, point blank, period. And so it is going to do whatever it takes to keep you alive, right? And so this is what it cracks me up a little bit, and it's also frustrating. So maybe that's why it cracks me up, because you're like, why on earth would I want to live in a way where I'm miserable? Why on earth would I want to live in a way where I can't get out of bed in the morning, or I can't stand to be around people, or I have to live with this memory that brings me back to this unbelievable pain? Why would I want to live like that? And I come back to this of, okay, the body's job is to keep you alive, and it innately has the power of healing. It doesn't know necessarily how to do it 100% because again, our brains are here too. It's not like the body's just like, I'm in charge of everything, everything's up to me. Like, they do have to be kind of collaborators in it. And so if our brain's one way and our body's a different way, they're not going to quite align up. So this memory pops up. You're like, I felt it all in my body. In that moment, I wondered, why does this thing still affect me to this extent? And so we hold on to this of, again, we're meant to stay alive. If body perceives something as a threat, right? It says, this is threatening. We care about this thing, right? I see this as a threat. I need to bring into you all the things that kept you alive in that time. Right? So if despair kept you alive, fantastic. If, anxiety kept you alive, awesome. Right? Which I'm like, you're like, awesome. Despair didn't feel awesome in that time. But it kept you alive. Right? In some way, shape, or form. And so it brings all those things back without even us making the conscious choice, because you consciously would not have made that choice to be like, I want to be slammed by a truck today and feel horrible for the next 3 days. Right. However, it knew, hey, these things kept us alive at one point. I bet it'll do it again. Right. And so it's not even necessarily about, do I think healing is continuous and forever? Absolutely. I do. I think it'll just forever be. I always say I will be in therapy the rest of my life. Because maybe not every week for the rest of my life, but in some capacity, I will forever be in therapy. Because not that I'm not healing, but life is always going to life, right?
Life is lifing.
And so in this sense of the body, really, I hate the term, the body keeps the score. You know this about me. I do not like that terminology. I am more so of like, the body keeps, because I feel like score feels so final, right? Like you think of like the scoreboard, and it's always increasing. It never, I don't know sports very well, right? But
it doesn't go down.
It doesn't ever go down, right? Like that is always going to either be increasing or staying. Versus in some ways, our nervous systems are so flexible, right? There are going to be things like, let's think of, we'll use your experience as a scoreboard. Sorry. When the event initially happened, that probably felt like 100.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You were like, it was horrific.
Yes.
I felt like I couldn't live through that.
Yeah.
Over time, the score went down.
Yes.
Right? And you were like, there was still a score there. But
yes.
it was not near as intense as
Right.
the original event.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I always say, I'm like, let's think of it like this. Like the body keeps the points, right? It keeps a point system. And
Right.
so, but points, I don't know if score and point makes a big difference, but I think of like, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. Again, I don't know much about sports, but in some way we can gain and we can lose. Right. And so in this instance, your body had to pull from what it had to remind you, like, that's a threat. We care about this thing.
Right.
How do we stay alive? And I'm sure it puts you into action, right? And sure,
Yeah.
in that moment you were like, oh my God, like I need to react. I need
Right.
to move.
Intervene.
I need to, I need to do something to prevent this event from occurring.
Right.
Because also in you know, and I know more about your situation than was explained, but like when this original event occurred, it's not like that was accessible. Right. There was no prevention.
Yeah.
There was no keeping something bad from happening.
Right. Very final.
Yes. Versus in this instance, there is.
Right.
And so I always say this too, as horrible as it was to experience, also how beautiful that your body does that for you.
Yeah.
Right?
No, it is.
You're like, I would have preferred not to have been affected.
Right. Yeah, but it is. I mean, and I agree. It's like if you don't know the absolute reason of why is this happening, I don't think you have to know that. I think you can trust there is a purpose here, and I now have choices to do what I will with it. You know, in that scenario that happened recently, I reacted real quick and no one would have known. Like no one that watched me would have known anything was wrong. I handled the situation. I excused myself. I did some deep breathing and I did a lot of grounding. You know, I'm right here right now because in my head, all I could see was flashbacks. And it was so crazy. It's like my vision was just not even there. It's like I could see everything like it was. And I had to really like touch the things around me, you know, drink something, eat something, you know, I am here physically. I am not there anymore. So making that very conscious choice to ground myself, I'm in this moment, everyone's safe, everything's okay. And I had to really just pull my vision, like looking around, noticing the colors, noticing what do I see around me. And it brought me back. But, you know, my muscles were sore for a couple days after. Even like my arms, just my whole body felt achy and I was irritable. It was a lot. I mean, and I was drained from that. It's like it took a lot from me. And I do agree. I think that in the past, it kept me alive. I think it would have been worse to feel numb or angry or, I mean, those are probably the only other options, but I felt sad. And I think I did something with that. But yeah, I brought myself back. I'm here right now. And it was okay. You know, it wasn't at 100. It was more like a 40 maybe.
Yeah, right. And
yeah,
you practice what I call like communication to the nervous system, right? We can't, again, as I was saying, like the nervous system is a language we don't particularly, we're not innately born with. You know, parents will give children, for example, a language like happy, sad, right? And they're doing it based on observation, right? Like I see you crying and really upset when I tell you no. I can imagine that's really frustrating and upsetting, right? But they're not telling them, hey, what are you noticing in your body as we're experiencing this? Do you notice like, man, you're really, I'm wondering if your stomach's upset or I'm wondering, I see you clenching your fist. Like they're not communicating anything. I mean, I don't have kids, but I'm assuming that's not something that really, you're like, we're focusing on language acquisition. We're not focusing also on this one piece. Parents have enough on their plate. They're like, we can't also add this in. Right. And so we tend to learn it later on. Like, what does it look like to communicate to my body as well? So it's not just this like, you know, I'm going to call it the blind driver, right? Like it's, I always say your body's in charge, regardless if you wanted to or be or not, it is, you know? And I think we like to think our brains are in charge, but you know, is it? I don't particularly think so. No. And so we have to learn how do we communicate back? Because we don't particularly do it through language to our body, right? And so then we do it through senses, right? And so you're like, I had to look around. I had to remind my body that like, I know this memory from the past came up and you are thinking we are back in that past moment. We are not, right? And so let me feel this room around me. Let me hear the noises going on around me that did not exist in that time, right? Like, and that's communication back to the nervous system, right? Because it can't, and that's why, okay, we bring somatics when we think of nervous system. Yeah. Because I would love if I could just be like, you know, hey, I mean, and sometimes I do, right? But it's more so about what's the feeling that arises as we gently talk to it versus you're telling it what to do and now it knows versus like, no, I want you to just notice what arises in you as we speak. Yeah. So same thing with sensory, right? Like deep breathing, like grounding, touching things, like even in this space, right? So I do a lot of what I just call, I don't call it, this is the name of it, of co-regulation, right? And so body to body, nervous system to nervous system. I don't even need to touch you, right? And our bodies are naturally going to co-regulate. I always say it's almost like a cell phone and the cell phone tower. Like we're pinging off of each other all the time. Yeah. Let's say you were in this space and you were really, really activated and anxious. Yes. My body would pick up on that regardless if you tell me it or not. Right. Because it's going to do this thing called a neuroception, right? And so neuroception comes in and it's essentially like the security system to our bodies. Yeah. And it's like, hey, Michaela's really activated and anxious. Is there a threat in here that we're not aware about? Yeah. Right? Yeah. And it may not be. You may be completely anxious about a thing later on in your day that I'm not aware about. Right. My body doesn't know that, right? It can't. It signals. It can't discern. No, Michaela's having something later in the day that she's really anxious about, right? Yeah. Instead, it's going to activate me too, right? To prepare in case there is a threat that I'm not aware about. Right. And so this happens all the time in every single person. It is a 24/7 surveillance system. And so we also don't realize that either, right? About the people around us truly do affect how we are, not just on a mental load, but like on a physical load as well. If we're constantly surrounded by chaos, if we're constantly surrounded by too much of anything, you know, it does have this deep effect on us, even if it's not something we're, you know, directly encompassed in. Yeah. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah. And I mean, I think we can all, this is probably a very easy thing to generalize. There are people that we can just be around and instantly feel calmer. Mm-hmm. People we can be around and instantly feel a little bit off. You know,
that's why people say things like bad vibes. I just got bad vibes. Yeah, bad vibes. That's neuroception, right? So think of it like that. Or like, I will always say, not that everybody has a great relationship with their mothers, right? But I will always say, like, if you do, you know the touch of a mother, right? Of like, I can say I have a great relationship with my mom, not to brag, but when, even at this age of 25 years old, when she hugs me, my body instantly soothes. And it's this deep, deep holding that I can't even describe. Like sometimes it'll almost bring me to tears, just depending on how I'm doing, right? And it's something I do not have with any other person, even my fiance. I love him dearly, but he does not have that same effect that my mother has. And that's, I mean, but also she carried me in her womb. So my nervous system knows her nervous system so very well because it was built off of it. Yeah. Right. And so again, this more so goes into attachment, right? But of people are like, why is my mom so important to me? She is a bad mom. I don't care. Right. Well, you do care. Right. Because it's not necessarily just a cognitive logical experience, but truly something biological, right? Of you are deeply intertwined and connected and we can't just sever that. Yeah. Right. So that's more of like co-regulation piece or that kind of.
Yeah. That makes sense. You know, this is kind of the opposite, but with Cyrus, my son, when I hug him or hold him, it's like everything around me just kind of like stops. It doesn't matter. Nothing else matters, you know, and I feel calmer, and I'm assuming he probably does too. I'm assuming we're both feeling that in that moment. It just like when we cuddle, it's just like everything else it's all right. It's calm. It's good. You know, so it makes sense.
Yeah, we do it with our children. Parents always feel so guilty some of the time of like, my kid shouldn't co-regulate me. Not all the time, but some of the, you know, like if you're constantly in distress and your kid is coming in being like, okay, I gotta help mom, like that's different than being like, that's something that just naturally occurs, right? It's not like you'll be like, stop having you co-regulate me, right? Versus like, we're providing it for each other. Yes. We do it with our pets. We do it with sometimes like nature is a big one, right? Have you ever just like for me, it's always water. I don't know what it is about water, but like water is just something where I'm like, it holds me, it soothes me. It's just the most comforting of experiences, right? And so I tell people to think about those moments of like these deep, deep, kind of more obvious moments
Yes.
And they're like, yeah, it's kind of unexplainable. It's kind of really hard to understand why that's so significant. And I'm like, right. And so these are the moments we can see nervous system so blatantly.
Right.
And that occurs all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And so within the work of therapy, within the work of when we focus on nervous system, we're trying to find the more minute moments. We're trying to find the day-to-day experiences, even as, I would say, even as we just sit on the couch, right? Or even as, you know, we're typing on the computer through our workday, or we're in school, you know, whatever all these things are, is how do we hone into this a little bit more instead of just focusing on, I'm anxious, what is going on? Let me think about it logically.
Right.
Instead, noticing, hey, my body's telling me I'm anxious. I wonder what it would be like to listen to that for a second. Yeah. And I always tell people, it is not to figure out how to fix it. We are not just going to go in and be like, okay, time to get rid of the anxiety, right? Because then, I mean, a lot of times, as you know, it doesn't work. We're not, it's not just going to go away.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not like, okay, do some deep breathing and your anxiety is going to go away forever.
Fixed.
Right? Versus, I mean, I wish, you know, but versus it's more so about, oh my gosh, like, let me just connect with this for a moment. See that it is happening. I'm not going to try to ignore it. I'm not going to try to fix it, but I'm just going to even acknowledge its existence and then move from there. How do I move with it as it, you know, whether everybody kind of pictures things differently. I'm someone where I will always personify like relationship. I love parts work. I love like the thought of like, we have all these different parts. How do we incorporate those parts? How do we have a relationship with these parts? And I always do that with nervous system, right? Yeah. So like, I'm like, nervous system's the big mama. And then we got all these little parts, like anxiety, depression, joy, despair. Like, what do those look like to exist within my city, my scape? And I think it just helps people connect with things on a much deeper level versus, and not that I'm trying to crap on CBT. I am not. I think it holds a lot of good things for a lot of people. Just not for me personally. But versus like, can you change the way you think? Can you change the way you behave? Yeah, you can do all those things, sure. But is it going to necessarily change the way you feel? Maybe to some extent. Maybe. And I think we miss a whole like treasure trove of things if we don't pay attention to the things beneath the surface.
Right. Absolutely. The things that aren't so obvious. The things that are just, again, don't communicate with us as clearly as logically. I think we have too many distractions in this world. And so it's like you said, just listening, paying attention, taking a moment to sit on the couch, connect, just pay attention, you know. I think that also shows up a lot in different types of research. Like you said, it's all a baked potato, right? Where things play different parts, you know, but in lots of different theories and lots of different types of research, connection is such a big piece. You know, when I was initially working on what am I going to do for my dissertation, I wanted to do resilience. What makes somebody resilient? And through my big trauma, I felt a bit isolated. I didn't feel like I had a ton of connection. You know, I had some, right? I had, jumping ahead, but I had enough, right? But I didn't feel like I had this great big support system where I could talk and feel and allow myself to just exist and be. It was more like hold it together and, you know, sun keeps coming up, right? So in all of the research I kept finding in different theorists, different points of view, it was connection, and they call it different things, but it's all connection. It's all connecting with other safe people, connecting with something bigger than yourself, the community, society, each other, religion, spirituality, something, connecting with nature, whatever it is, connection. And every time I'm like, no, it can't be that. It's not that. It has to be something else. Like, I didn't have that. But when you break it down, you know, that's really what I found. It's connection. And I'm like, you know what? I had enough connection to pull through. You know, you don't need this beautiful big support system where you have all these safe people. If you don't have that big, pretty, picture perfect, like family to lean on or whatever it is, you can create that. You can find it in different ways. I think, you know, it's sometimes about just looking outside of the picture perfect Instagram pictures of people's families, right? Find something else, nature, pets, whatever it is. I mean, I adopted Oscar, my dog, shortly after my big thing. And I say he's going to live forever, and he will when he, I mean.
I say the same thing about Presley. Because I'm like, you know, and this is what I share with people too, of like when I first start doing therapy with people, the big thing we focus on is what connection do you have?
Yeah.
Because I'm the same way of like, you don't get through the things you get through all on your own. We are not meant to. Right. So I always go back to, again, building blocks of biology, I suppose. Like when human beings were first created, we had to live in packs, right? We had to live like, because everybody kind of had a role. There was safety in numbers, right? Like you weren't surviving in the wilderness on your own, or surviving. I always think of cavemen, but I don't know. Again, you know, you weren't doing it on your own. Right. And you weren't meant to. Yeah. You were never meant to do it on your own. But we now live in a society that is so independent, that is so, you know, you've only got yourself. Every man for himself. Look out for you. And, you know, not that I'm saying that doesn't hold value in some sense, if I could speak English, some sense. And I think it takes a lot away, especially in our field, in the work we do, of like, how on earth were you ever supposed to hold those things alone? You weren't, right? Yeah. And so much of the work I do is with people is, one, can you let me in on this too? So I can be in the deep, ugly, mucky stuff with you. Right. And you can experience what is it like to have somebody in this with me, and just to feel, not that I have all the answers to fix it. I wish I did. Yeah. But can I be there and hold it with you? Right.
Empathy.
Yes. And so I look at it from this like more, again, nervous system, energetic kind of experience of like, it is now, your nervous system now feels safety, right? Of like, oh, okay. Like there is safety in this, even though it has felt so unsafe, so untouchable. So, you know, I just need to shove it down and not address it, right? Yeah. Like, oh my gosh, I'm getting some air in this. It's nice to be able to breathe. Yeah. And so much of the work I do with people is like, where do we find any sense of connection, any pockets of connection, anything, right? And it's not just people. Sometimes I find people the worst connection because I'm like, people are exhausting. Yeah. Not that there's not good. Not that I'm saying don't have connections with people. You definitely should. Right. But that's okay if that doesn't want to be your only act of connection, right? Yeah. We have so many passive connections, like nature or pets. Pets are my favorite one. I can't lie. Like, yes. Presley, like, she's the world to me. When I'm having a bad day, I'm like, nobody talk to me. Me and Presley need to have a conversation together. Right. And she doesn't know what's happening, but to me, she knows everything.
Oh, yeah.
Because her nervous system speaks to my nervous system, too, regardless. Right. She doesn't speak English.
The same language.
But they do, right? Yeah. And so I do think, like, especially in this work, like, it's not even just connection with others, but a connection to ourselves, right? Like, what does it look like in resilience to build deeper connection with who we are, and to go beyond this level of logic and intellect, and instead learn this language we don't know particularly, to have curiosity about it, to have openness to it, to know it is not like a step-by-step movement, even though I wish it was, right? Actually, I don't know if I wish it was, because I think we'd lose so much of the of this, you know, importance of it if I had a step-by-step answer. Right. And instead, do we find resilience in, man, I deeper know myself. I deeper know the things my body does for me. I more deeply am aware of these things, and I'm more deeply connected to it. Right. And so that's why I always say, like, it's such a hard thing to necessarily, like, articulate to people, right? Because I'm like, you got to feel it. Like, when you feel it, you know it, right? Yeah. Versus when I explain it to people, sometimes I'm like, I think they think like, oh, okay, we got a hippie, right? Or which is fine. Yeah. You know, I don't particularly care if people think that. And I'm like, just like, let's just see what happens. Let's just see what it's like to listen and to receive. And they're like, okay. And then we get in touch with these things, and it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much there that I was not even aware was there. And I'm like, yep, we just have to allow space for it.
Absolutely.
But we're not meant to allow space for it alone, right? Yeah. So that's why I'm like, connection, curiosity, creativity, you know. Was that all 3 C's? Oh my gosh, that was. Yes. The 3 C's.
The 3 C's of resilience in nervous system work. I don't know. There's a better title. Yes.
So that's why I kind of, I don't know, I love what I do, and that's kind of why I do it in a very brief snapshot. Maybe I'm still learning. I'm still forever growing in it. I think it's forever changing, and I still have to hold those things too of like, what is it like to have connection in this work, creativity?
Right.
What is it like to have curiosity? Right. Because I don't have all the answers, and not that I'm always searching for them, but I'm always searching for how are we forever growing in those areas.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
That makes sense. And I agree. It's something that is difficult to explain. And I think that's why we don't learn a ton about it, because it's like, you can't put that in a textbook. I mean, you can't put these things on paper. You know, I would love for mental health to be more widely discussed in elementary school, middle school, high school. I mean, you know, it's not. But if this was brought up, if we could be taught in the beginning, we don't have to understand it. We just have to feel. Allow yourself to notice, you know, meditation, right? Just sitting in silence, allowing there to be a lull. You know, I think so often we just, again, use distractions to take away from noticing what's going on in my body. You know, so removing that and allowing ourselves just to be. And sometimes that's scary.
Oh, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's so terrifying.
Yeah.
I always am like, okay, imagine there's a locked door and behind the door you have no idea what it is. Right.
Yeah.
But you're like, it's kind of spooky in there.
Oh, yeah.
Again, why you are not meant to go into it alone.
Right.
Because why? Why would I go into that dark, scary room alone that I have no idea how to handle what's behind it?
Right.
And so that's so much, I know of the work you do and the work I do of like, that's what we're here for. It's like, I am willing to go into the dark, scary parts with you. Because I also have the belief that we are all capable of being with whatever is behind it.
Yeah.
And making space for it and making it so it's not this dark, scary. I always say the boogeyman. Like, it doesn't need to be the boogeyman.
Right.
Maybe it's just the man that was there to protect you, and we misidentified him, and then he got really scared because you were screaming at him. Right.
Right. Yeah. So let's invite him in for tea. Let's, you know, sit together.
Try to understand a little bit more. You're like, why were you in the shadows? And he's like, okay, well, you were yelling at me, telling me to go away. Like, was that an invitation to come forward? Like, I hid there and protected you from all those bad things. And I may have scared you in the midst of it, but it kept you alive. Right. And you're like, all right, I guess.
Yeah, you're like, your methods are questionable, but thanks.
But you did what you needed to do. Right.
Right. Yeah. So when it feels very big, let's say someone does have a very big trauma, you know, very, very dysregulated nervous system, maybe some complex PTSD. Obviously, connection is so important, but beyond that, how would you suggest somebody just starting?
So I always tell people, like, when you step into this, do not anticipate we are just going straight into the room, straight into that scary, dark room. Like, we are just going to become acquainted with the space outside of it at first, right? Because if your nervous system is completely dysregulated, if it is having all these huge responses to things, I almost think of like a startle reflex. Like, if you're startling to everything, you're not ready to go in that room. And that's okay that you're not ready.
Yeah.
Let's build some regulation in, right? Let's build some tolerance in so that we can slowly step closer.
Right.
I always share with people, like, when you come into therapy, I never expect you to come in and share with me your deepest, darkest wounds.
Right.
Are you welcome to? Sure. This is your space to do as you please. And also, it is okay if you're not ready to do that. Yeah. Because that's like jumping headfirst into the deep end.
Right.
When you don't know how to swim. And I don't want you to do that. I want you to first just walk around the water, kind of notice what's around you, become acquainted with the way the water moves, become acquainted with the environment. Great.
Yeah.
Then maybe we can dip a toe in if you feel comfortable. If it's too much, we take a step back.
Yeah.
Right? So this comes back to, again, like, trusting that your nervous system is going to tell you what you are and you are not ready for.
Right.
And if you're not ready for something, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the work we do is about, how do I become ready for it? Whether that be, you know, things like more of what we consider typical coping, right?
Yeah.
So like breathing or grounding or, you know, like thought reframe, whatever it may be. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Those are kind of like your life preserves. We have those so we can regulate through these moments.
Right.
And also understand, you know, why are these things so scary right now?
Yes.
And so we have a little bit more context to what's occurring.
Yeah.
And so I always tell people that too. I'm like, I think so many people avoid trauma counseling because they're like, why on earth would I want to touch into that huge, horrific thing that happened to me?
Yeah.
And I always use this analogy, and I don't know if it's a great analogy, but I'm like, imagine you live in a home and there's a bunch of bodies buried beneath the home. Okay. I know that's kind of graphic, but imagine there's a bunch of bodies buried beneath the home and you know they're there.
Right.
But you're like, I am going to keep living typically. I'm going to have dinner in this home every night. I'm going to sleep with my head on the pillow every night. I'm going to go to and from work. I'm going to raise my children in this house, right? If you don't ever address the bodies under the house, that does not take away from the fact that they are still there, right? And you can live life as if they are not affecting you, but to some level it is, because it's terrifying to live with bodies under your house, right?
Well, at some point they start stinking.
Right. You're like, they're going to start decomposing. People are going to start wondering, like, where is so-and-so? That's why I'm like, I don't know if that's a fantastic analogy, but I always use something kind of gruesome of like, that's trauma, right? Like trauma is this gruesome, like very dysregulating, very distressing experience, and we can act like it doesn't affect us, right? We can live life, we can be functioning very, very well, and at some point it is still going to be affecting you naturally, because how could it not?
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like this is probably a good example. I have a real life example of something physical. So
it's like a body? Like, please don't bring up a body.
No bodies. So I guess had a cavity when I was a kid or whatever. I don't know. I guess I had a filling from way before. And when I was in labor, I ended up cracking that filling and I had a hole in my tooth. So I let it go untreated for 2 years. Okay. So for 2 years, I had a hole in my tooth.
A good look into your dental habits.
Right. Like, we know how I feel about the dentist, you know. So for 2 years, I did not get that treated. And for a while, it was fine. You know, it was okay. I didn't chew on that side of my mouth for 2 years. Okay. At some point, it gets worse. It gets harder to manage. It gets harder to treat. You know, it festers, right? It's kind of a gross word, especially for a tooth, but it festers. It's not going to just magically get better. I really was hoping that it would. It did not.
Right, you're like, my body innately heals. It is going to heal this thing for me.
Spoiler alert, I had to go to the dentist. So I was quoted an insane amount of money for a root canal. And then I went somewhere else and she was like, I think I can fix this for you without these drastic measures. And she did. And she's like, if you waited any longer, like, I don't think we would have been able to save this, right? So it's there. I mean, you can go, like you said, a long time pretending like something doesn't hurt, like it doesn't exist, like it's not there. But at some point, you should probably acknowledge it. I mean, you should probably acknowledge those things at some point.
And I think people also don't realize, like, I have a person who I see currently, and he has gone the majority, like, he's an older gentleman. He has gone the majority of his life not dealing with these really hard, horrific experiences from when he was a child. So, like, imagine 50, 60 years in between. And he's like, I lived life well. I was successful. I had kids. I have a wife. Like, all these things. But he's like, and also through it all, I was gritting my teeth and bearing it, you know? And he's like, I was so scared to start this process, and it really wasn't that scary.
Right.
Like, he's like, I came into it, and like, have there been hard moments through this? Absolutely.
Right.
But it was much harder to live with those things just existing and me being completely alone in it. Like, and so I think that is just truly, and as therapists, we're not particularly scared of therapy because, again, I've been in a lot of therapy, you know?
Same.
Like, you don't become a therapist. I mean, some people become a therapist without therapy, but
not me.
No, I was like, cannot relate. And so therapy at some point just becomes a lot less scary. But like, I sometimes forget, if you've never been in it, like, you're like, I'm entering this thing that I have no idea about. And like, that's terrifying.
Right.
And also, like, what's the other alternative, you know, of, okay, you continue living life, and that's very familiar, right? And is that how you want to do it, you know?
Yeah, and it's, I mean, I think like you said, I mean, using the tooth example, like, I'm so glad I went to the dentist. I wish I did it 2 years prior, you know? Just start.
Right, you're like,
go.
Right, you're like, I could have gone and had it dealt with and avoided so many months of pain.
Right, like that. Yeah, so same thing. It's like, just start. You know, you set the pace. I mean, counseling's a little less invasive.
And it's a lot more long term, right?
Yeah.
Of like, you're not going to come see a therapist one time and then be like, I'm good.
Root canal.
I'm cured. Right? Versus like, it truly is a process. It truly is. And I always say, like, your nervous system sets the pace. It is not about you coming in and saying, I'm going to see you 10 times and then I'm going to be fine.
Right.
Okay. That's your
brain.
going
heavy. Like,
right. That's up to your brain.
Right.
But like, I want to hone in on this thing that hasn't been given space.
Right.
So what does that say?
Oh, yeah.
And then people are like, I don't know. And I was like, well, let's touch into it. Right.
Yeah.
Like, what do you notice? And they're like, I notice I'm having a really hard time breathing. Right. And I'm like, great. So it's telling you it's not feeling great about something. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I think that's such a huge thing too of like, we come into therapy thinking like what I've had so many people ask me like, what does it look like to even do this in therapy? And I'm like, well, it's different for every single person. Right. I wish I had a cut and dry example, absolutely. But I really don't. Right. And so let's just see what it looks like for you. Yeah. And then they're like, okay. And then I listen to my nervous system and what it tells me. And I'm like, I think we need to go in this direction. What do you think? And they're like, all right. Right. Because just like I trust my nervous system and the things it tells me, I help people build relationship with theirs so they can trust what it tells them.
Right. Absolutely.
Which it can kind of sound silly, but I'm like, again, you just have to feel it. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes, and you tell me if you have a different perception, but I think sometimes with the people who, I'm like, everyone has some trauma. I don't know. But the people who are like, I don't have any trauma, nothing bad has really ever happened to me, but I still there's some stuff in there, like, but I don't have anything to really work on. Those people sometimes are harder for me, What would you say to those people starting when maybe they don't feel like they have a valid reason to have a dysregulated nervous system, or maybe they just feel like they don't quite fit the quote criteria, right? What would you say to those people?
I always say to people too, like, you're making that assumption based on logic, right? Like you are doing this based on like critical thinking and intellectualizing circumstance or events. It is not up to you what you find traumatizing, right? Like I always tell people, trauma is not about the event itself. It is about how the event affected you on a for me, a nervous system level, right? But on some level. And so people a lot of times will come in and say like, this does not, correlate to the reaction I'm having, or this is not a good enough reason to be considered traumatized. I'm like, okay, we don't have to call it that. Yeah. Trauma's a word. Do you know what I mean? If we don't want to describe your experience as such, let's not describe it as such. Yeah. What feels right is a good descriptor for you.
Right.
And so again, it's not necessarily about the event itself. I use this example a lot of like, you and I could be in a car crash together. Mm-hmm. You may come out of it perfectly fine and be like, hey, I'm going to get an Uber to go home. Are you, versus I may say, no, I'm going to walk the 15 miles home. Yep. I'm never getting in a car again.
Yep.
Because it's not up to us on a intellectual level to decide what's traumatic and what's not traumatic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Versus it truly is about, how did your body perceive this threat? Mm-hmm. Did it find it life-threatening? Right. If it did, on some level, to whatever extent I found it harmful or dangerous, it is going to then respond in such a way.
Right.
And so, you're like, I don't get a choice in that. No. Like, it's just going to do what it's going to do.
Right.
And so now I have to help it kind of catch back up to speed and be like, hey, we're not in that event anymore. Can I safely bring you alongside where we are now? And so we can let go of these things that we are clinging on so tightly to keep safe, and know, hey, let's just catch up to where we are now, where it is safe.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Yeah. And it's just, I think, again, about paying attention, and listening and honoring those things that maybe we don't understand. Maybe we don't even agree with how our nervous system feels, but it doesn't matter. You acknowledge it, you honor it, you hear it. So key takeaways, the 3 C's. Okay, curiosity, creativity, and connection, right? Okay, I like it. Not jumping in the deep end, just allowing yourself to tiptoe, right?
Yeah, I was like, we're not going to avoid it, right? We're not going to be like, this thing doesn't exist. And also, like, we are allowed to slowly approach it as much as we would like.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And again, as this as a clinician too, of like, if I can generally tell the difference between avoidance and needing to move slowly. Yeah. Avoidance is, and I don't even particularly like the word avoidance, because to me, if you're avoiding something, that tells me your nervous system's not ready. Yeah. Right? How do I help you become more ready so that we don't feel the need to avoid. Yeah. Right? I think feel like so much of the time we use avoidance as like a choice of like, you're choosing not to address these things versus it's really scary to address these things.
Right. What's the barrier?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So again, it's all up to your nervous system pace.
Yeah.
You can come into it saying, I'm ready to go really, really hard in the paint. All right.
Yeah. I mean, some people come in and they're like, let's dive in. And I'm like, okay, great.
I know. And I always go, and how do you notice when it's too much? Because I need you to be able to notice when it is too much so we can take a step back.
Right. When we take a break, get out of the pool.
Right.
Yeah.
When do we need to put sunblock on?
Yeah.
Like, we need to lay out.
Snack. Yeah.
It's like you're taking the babies to the pool.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's part of it. Any other key takeaways?
I think the other thing I like to highlight is, or emphasize again, is that like, this is my area. Like, this is what I always say. I'm like, this is my jam. Like, this is the thing I will always feel passionate about, always feel is truly so instrumental in therapy and in mental well-being. Again, I don't know everything about anything. And so, like, always take everything with a little bit of grain of salt and curiosity. Ashley said these things, so that is 100% true. Not necessarily. You may feel differently. That's fine. Yeah. Right? And also, I think all therapy is so different for every person. Yeah. You know, I've met a lot of people who are like, this is too unstructured for me. I need something more structured. Right. No problem. Yeah. Right. And so it can really fit in so many different areas and molds. I go back to the baked potato, right? Of like, if focusing on nervous system, you know, is too unstructured, feels too scary, feels too unbelievable right now, no problem. Yeah. Let's like have that be a side, and what else needs to be the main focus. Right. Because a lot of times too, I think it is hard for people to find this stuff as truth, or to find it as like factual. Yeah. When we do have research behind it. I mean, I'm not just pulling this stuff out of nowhere. We do have research, and I have looked at the research and everything like that. But again, it can be, again, just like uncertain, I think. Yes. And so I always encourage people of that too, of like, we incorporate this as much as you are ready to incorporate it. Right. It is not something that I'm going to force upon you. It is not something that I'm going to say this is the end all be all of everything. Right. I don't think there is an end all be all of healing. I'm going to be completely honest. Even, do I think CBT holds a place? Absolutely. Yeah. Is it my favorite? Not by any means. Yeah. But does it hold purpose? Yeah. And for some people, that is their thing. Yeah. And so I think that's such an important piece in therapy too, is like, yes, find a clinician that aligns with you, and also know, like, even in this work, like, there's room for all. Right. I agree. And I think even at different stages in your healing, in your life, different things will work for you. You know, I'm very much like, I love to look at childhood. I love to look at what are the experiences you had in childhood that gave you beliefs about yourself, and how does that show up now for you? You know, so I'm more like, how is your past impacting your present, right? You know, other people are, you know, focused on different things, right? So it's just really about, what does the client need in that stage of life, in that moment? And we adjust, right? But maybe even different counselors at different stages of your life. You know, I've seen different counselors through time. Oh, yeah. You know, so I don't have the same person at 15 that I now have at 25. Yeah. But did that person at 15 very much help me? Absolutely. Yeah. Right. She helped me with what I needed at 15. Yeah. Versus the person I work with now is now helping me with the things I need at 25. Right. So I think that's the thing too, is people, it's okay to have flexibility in this too, of like noticing, is this something I need right now and I'm ready to address? Or are there things that maybe I need to address before coming to this work? Right. Yeah. Just about, again, paying attention. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It all comes down to that, right? Yeah. Removing the distractions, noticing. I think of the Barbie movie. I never watched it. You have to watch it. I never watched it. You have to. It gave me too much anxiety. It's so good. It triggered something in my nervous system. Okay. That felt unsafe. We'll talk about it. Maybe I need to look into that. We'll talk about it. Yeah. But at one point, she's like, feel. It's beautiful. I love it. Okay. But thank you. I appreciate you. I feel like this was so informative, and it's good. It's good to hear these things again, and it's good to connect. I appreciate your my nervous system appreciates your nervous system, and the space we've created in here. Yes. So, yep. Thank you. Mm-hmm.